Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and I've got to start out by saying that this was not how today was supposed to go. Oh, my camera also. That is not how my camera is supposed to go. Hold on. All right. We're going to start with yesterday's news. Celebrations in Minmatar Republic after shutdown of stellar transmuter in Egmar and Vard. Pator Hematar. Oh, sorry. Celebrations in Minmatar Republic after shutdown of stellar transmuters in Egmar and Vard. Pator Hematar. Successful efforts to shut down the prototype stellar transmuter in Egmar and Vard have been met with celebrations across the Minmatar Republic. Senator Malatu Shakur has hailed the efforts of the Minmatar engineers, Republic fleet units, and the fighters of the Tribal Liberation Force for their, quote, tremendous service to the 7 tribes of Matar, end quote. Following over 2 weeks of desperate efforts since the extreme stellar event in Turner, the captured stellar transmuter in Egmar and Vard were safely shut down, with Republic science and engineering teams reporting no signs of lasting disruption to the stars of each system. Republic fleet forces were also able to maintain secure occupation of the transmuter sites due to the ongoing control of the system by Minmatar militia forces. Well-placed sources within Shakur's government indicates that monitoring of the Turner star emissions and the effects of local space-time in the run-up, through, and after the stellar event helped guide the Republic's engineering teams. Minmatar research efforts were also considerably bolstered by militia and loyalist capsuleers recovering large quantities of valuable data on the stellar transmuters. The scope has been told that there are indications that Amar efforts were focused on, quote, stellar engineering in an attempt to create new wormhole pathways, possibly connecting all 3 test locations. One Republic source has also stated that, quote, that the, quote, partial Amar success in Turner was clearly achieved without regard for the cost and should be interpreted as an attempt to pave the way for large-scale invasions of the Republic, end quote. The Amar Empire has made no comment on these claims. Federal militarization of the Intaki system questioned by former presidential candidates. Intaki placid. Former presidential candidates Shaleen Ramnev and Suvio Belleron have publicly questioned the apparent militarization of the Intaki system as further infrastructure projects are being undertaken by the Federation Navy following the invasion and liberation of the system. The appearance of Stargate construction and naval station projects in particular have raised fears of constant military presence. Former Arcurio Mayor and strong runner-up of the YC-122 presidential election, Shaleen Ramnev, has stated her, quote, unequivocal support for the removal of the Intaki system and people from a position that they should never have been in, but has expressed her concerns that, quote, further military provocation by the Federation in the Intaki system will simply repeat a cycle of conflict between Galente, Caldari, and Intaki in another guise, end quote. Senator Suvio Belleron, representing the federal subdistrict covering the city of Lenioka on the Intaki Prime, has been more critical and singled out President Celis Agard for some harsh words. Quote, were the federal senates for the Intaki system consulted before the invasion? Yes. Did we consent to the action? Yes. With some misgivings. Simply to see our people freed from constant warfare under the absurd militia system. But did we agree to a permanent federal military presence? No, we did not. President Agard is quick to offer reassurances and make deals, but time and again, we've seen that the Federation's president will break all agreements, new or old. What's the basis for lasting security is that? End quote. Reports of federal Marines expanding their presence beyond the control of Kenta Yavat transorbital launch facility has also led to protests by many sections of the Intaki diaspora. While Intaki separatists have increased their political agitation following the invasion, the largest protest by far has come from the Intaki autonomists advocating maximum Intaki independence within a looser voluntary federation. The Intaki autonomists protests have been joined by many across the Federation's society, forming a core which many liberal and regionalist Galente citizens have been willing to support. In other news, heavy fighting in Huala and Carmornan frontline systems in Amarr Minmatar war zone. Amarr Privy Council reportedly considering proposals to for further development of stellar transmuters. Federation Marines raid suspected Serpentis drugs laboratories in the Arcat Mountains, Intaki Prime. State Protectorate pincer attacks bring widespread destruction to Aldranet and Oix systems. Caldari megacorporations cancel all corporate security leave as CEP meets on new Caldari Prime. Intaki Syndicate representatives escorted from Placid to Syndicate space by DED Special Forces. Concord Assembly deadlocked by competing proposals on reform of Emergency Militia War Powers Act. Intaki Space Police increases security patrols in ZTAC 6 NQ6 constellation as station militias mobilize. Federation Navy refuses to comment on Intaki Gate construction project or status of a Mignon Gate. Theology Council holds court hearings across throne worlds on status of heterodox theologians. Rumors sweep Matar of secret meeting between Generals Kenneth Filmer and Krilla Frit. Quaif Company denies conflict of interest created by extensive holdings in Syndicate region. House Sorum gifts fusion generators to Amatar mandate as new Artichoper building program announced. New clashes between Angel Cartel and rival gangs as smuggling networks reroute around militarized zones. And that is it for the news for November 21st, YC 124. A couple of things to note before we move on. First of all, I find it very interesting that the Minmatar did successfully shut it down, and the Minmatar and the Amarr were attempting to make connections in wormholes. So this really brings home one of the major questions, right? And this is one of those questions I'm not sure if we're going to get a good answer for, especially on the Gallente Caldari side. We're going to ask it again. But, okay, great. It is very clear that our actions are impacting the story. But what's funny is that we've actually gone like full bore now, right? Like, it used to be kind of a game, right? Like, if you bring in this much resources, then you get the gate, or you don't get the gate, right? It's very straightforward. It's very understandable. The thing is that we actually don't know what would have happened if Egmar and Vard had not been caught or captured. We don't know what would have happened if the Minmatar hadn't have completed their research technology. We don't know what would have happened if the Gallente seized the Surthuld constellation at the beginning of the event in the same way that the Minmatar seized the Egmar and Vard systems, right? Like, all we know is that what's happening now are direct consequences of how that all played out. And that's pretty cool. But especially with the news that came out today, which would be the day after this news, it becomes kind of wild to try to figure out what is scripted versus not. So either way, Federation militarization of Intaki system. Here's actually a good one. So is the Intaki system gate there because we failed to build the one in Surthuld? Like, they already have the gate in Amignon. Is it that they failed that, and so now they're redirecting it to Intaki? Which brings up the interesting point of, Spoons looked at it beforehand while it was being built, and he believed that it did not point to Athenoon. It pointed towards Intaki, and we always thought that. So was this the plan all along? Was the invasion of Intaki the plan all along? Like, I think I talked in a previous episode, and I will later when we go deeper into Intaki on another day, but like, Celis Agard has a history with the Intaki people and with, providing security towards the border systems. She herself being Yin Mei, which is kind of the other side. So Was it always about Intaki? What would have happened if we had taken Othanoon? Would we have gotten that gate and not gotten Intaki gate? Would Intaki not have been captured? I assume that those would have been like that was done for the sake of like shaping the war zone in the expansion, but like, is it? And again, we'll see more about that in the next day's news. The other thing I want to point out is that Senator Suvio Belleron is a very suspicious guy to come up. So he is, he represents the city of this city on Intaki Prime. So he is a senior senator from Intaki, right? But here's the thing: Suvio Belleron is the guy who made the Belleron bill. So in 2011, he attempted to abolish capital punishment, and then after the Yinmei Civil War, he proposed another bill to ban capital punishment. And this became such a big deal that like the protesters and counter-protesters had violent clashes about it. And the reborn Intaki senator punched Suvio Belleron in the face, in his nose during one of the debates. So it was controversial even from the beginning. And Roden chose to just pocket it and not actually make a decision either way. So then when Celis Agard was elected, she kind of sat on it and did like committees to research it for a while. And then in the end, because of the support of the Intaki, she was able to veto it and still get the funding that she needed for her infrastructure bill. Another random weird thing about all of this is that the reason why Celis Agard lost the presidency in 2011 to Roden was largely blamed on the fact that Intaki at the time was held by the Caldari state and therefore were not allowed to vote. So the Intaki being unable to support Celis Agard is why she was not elected and Roden was. So this stuff goes back. And more importantly, Suvio Belleron and his growing negative opinion of Celis Agard is also got some history to it. So don't necessarily suspect that this is like 100% unbiased, if that makes sense. Personal attacks don't belong in civilized debate. I mean, that's true. All right. I do like the fact that they're focusing on the war zone, like they're telling us where the front lines are, and that's kind of cool. So remember the Khanid were doing surveying of one of their AO blue stars, and Lidai linked up with them to help them. So Lidai being the Caldari Mega Corporation. So watch that space, I guess. Now, this is what got me to fall off a cliff yesterday. Arcat Mountain. So first of all, when you start paying attention to the relationship between the Serpentis, the Intaki, the Syndicate, and all these different things, it becomes a clusterfuck. That's why I wasn't able to piece everything together quite yet, because it's all just so much about the Intaki Syndicate and all that kind of stuff. But that's not even the crazy part here, right? The crazy part is that Arcat Mountains. So I googled Arcat Mountains, right? The thing is that Arcat Mountains comes up with several results. One of them is the fact that the Eve soundtrack. Whoa. That was louder than I expected. Okay, this isn't really it. There we go. People who have listened to Eve Reader podcasts will probably recognize it. This one. Yeah, it is a really good track. So that is Arcat Mountain, okay? However, if you Google Arcat Mountain, you get the song, you get this Reddit post where CCP, I don't remember who that is, but the mountain from Game of Thrones, who's Icelandic, came to the place, and so they took this picture with him and they called it Arcat Mountain, which tells me that like this is obviously a cultural thing within the Eve universe. They can just refer to it, you know, same as the song. Which leads me to this. Mountain trees are similar to that of home trees. The difference between the difference being that they are not used by the Na'vi to establish a home or a tribe for living space. Instead, these trees exist outside of the isolated home trees. Mountain trees can be normally found in the rows living alongside other mountain trees. However, rarely are they grouped as few are. One such geological site to see a true grouping of mountain trees is that of the Arcat Mountains. So, now timing goes that the Arcat Mountains, Eve's Arcat Mountains, had to have existed first, right? But at the same time, I think that we can confirm the next crossover event. You know, they have a new avatar, the water thing. It's coming out. So, you know, clearly this is, I don't know, man. Maybe if that happens, then, that'd be pretty funny, actually. So yeah, that's yesterday I tweeted that about like what? Acat. Sorry, you're right. Acat. Acat Mountains. I don't know why I put an R in there. It's Acat Mountains. They're both Acat. No, I copied and pasted it. I got them wrong. Yeah, Avatar Waterbender, exactly. I just pronounced it wrong, but at the time, I just copied and pasted it because I didn't know what was what. All right, either way, that madness aside. Also, I can't find any other references to it being used in the news, I don't think. Let me actually just double check that one more time. Oh, yeah, that's right. There is a couple of times the Acat Mountains are mentioned. Here we go. Oh, okay, never mind. Here we go. The threat of serious warfighting was at its highest level when OB and LDPS forces broke out in fortified positions in the Kanta-Yavat transorbital launch facility in the foothills of the northern Acat Mountains. So that I'm glad that we looked this up. Where was the yeah, see, look. So this report, expanding their presence beyond the control of the Kanta-Yavat transorbital launch facility, is related to this, because the Acat Mountains are the launch facility in question is in the foothills of the Arcat Mountains. That's kind of cool. Now, this is also when the state was fighting over Intaki once they were they took control of it, which is another piece of the Intaki news or lore. This is where Lidai managed to steal their tech that they turned into subcranial nanocontrollers. Let's see. Oix has been an amazing war zone recently, by the way. Faction warfare has been great on all levels. Hey, thanks, Bogdan. The Intaki Syndicate representatives, foreshadowing, we'll talk about that. Deadlock for proposal of reform of Emergency Militia War Powers Act. So that means that CCP is leaving it in their back pocket to change the faction warfare system again. And by that, I mean, like, chances are when the allegiance system comes out, that will be the conclusion of this little shtick. A cat means the plural of an offensive woman. Oh, man. Intaki Space Police. Oh, yeah, it's French. That's right. No, okay. That, ironically enough, might actually mean something. Oh, Finnish. No, Finnish. Finnish is Caldari. Caldari or Finnish? Weird. Anywho, Federation Navy refuses to comment on Intaki Gate construction project or status of a Mignon Gate. Theology counts, and we do assume that these gates are connected, but at this point, there's been a lot of misdirection recently, right? So who knows? Theology Council courts hold hearings across Throne Worlds on status of heterodox. Yeah. Kenneth Filmer and Krilla. Kenneth Filmer is, I think, the leader of the Minmatar's militia, and Krilla Frit is the leader of the resistance inside of Skarkon, if I remember correctly. I gotta move on too, so. Yeah. Kumatar Krill Ifrit was in Skarkon when it got taken. So yeah, Krill Ifrit is the dude that's running the show in the resistance in Skarkon. Really? I hate it when that happens. Like for some reason the search will pull up something even if it doesn't like relate. Ah, well, whatever. Where was I? Oh my gosh. Oh, here it is. Quake Company denies conflict of interest with extensive holding in Syndicate region. Again, foreshadowing. House Sorum gives fusion generators to Amatar mandate as new Artishipper building programs announced. This is really interesting. Once again, it's the relationship between House Sorum and House Artishipper becoming more and more solidified. House Sorum being one of the most militant, House Artishipper being one of the most, like, pious, religiously zealous is probably maybe a good word. Puritan. Puritan's probably the better word. Either way, so the Amatar mandate falls under Artishipper, and Artishipper has been pretty friendly to the Amatar mandate for a while. In fact, the attacks, the EOM attacks really was initiated, or rather, I should say, what's his name? Chakade was really inflamed by the fact that the Artichoper elevated the one of the Ammatars to be governor or a holder, I think it was, which makes it the first non-Amar to be, or the first member of the Ammatar to actually be elevated to an actual office rather than just kind of be an underling. New clashes between Angel Cartel and rival gangs as smuggling networks reroute and around militarized zones. Probably related to the Deathless, at least, if not just the Sekal clan or whatever. And could be related to this increased Serpentis activity in Intaki, right? Or it being called out. So they're rerouting around the militarized war zones. There's so much military presence that the smugglers are having to go around it. That's it. Ready? Breaking news. Caldari State takes control of Syndicate Constellation. DS TAC M4Q Constellation. Syndicate. Caldari State forces have taken full control of the constellation of DS TAC M4Q, according to reports from the Syndicate region. The dramatic move appears confirmed and within the apparent agreement of the Intaki Syndicate, following an emergency update to the Concord Assembly's Register of Sovereignty at the request of the Intaki Syndicate's ambassador to Concord. Caldari Navy units have established significant bridgeheads in the DS TAC M4Q constellation and has begun rapid construction of new infrastructure, apparently including a number of stations in the system such as UM-TAC Q7F and OEK-TAC NJ. Unconfirmed reports indicate that the Intaki Syndicate permitted some limited constructions ahead of the occupying force, seemingly preparatory to the Caldari move. See, we probably could have been able to find that, but we didn't. Executive General Haika Torigo has been given command authority over the force establishing Caldari presence, building on her experience with the successful Surthud campaign in Placid. Chairman Akima Saraki has addressed the Caldari State. I'm trying to remember how CCP pronounced it. Quote, Caldari Navy forces executed this operation with the full cooperation of the Intaki Syndicate. On behalf of the Chief Executive Panel, I have signed a treaty of protection with the Intaki Syndicate as negotiated with the wise partnership of the Governor Silfi and Diabel of Poidat. The Caldari State undertakes to secure the ongoing independence of the station owners and system governors of the Intaki Syndicate, in return for which we have been granted colonial rights in the system of DS-TAC M4Q constellation. The systems of the DS-TAC M4Q constellation. Although seemingly taken by surprise by the Federation Navy's invasion and liberation of Intaki and 10 other Placid systems, the Caldari State has shown itself to be able to craft a swiftly and equally surprising response by taking advantage of the Syndicate's clear belief that it is under imminent threat from the Federation. The state's new protectorate constellation gives a foothold in nullsec regions close to the Placid region it has so long contested for control with the Federation. Federation authorities appear to be calm in response to this surprise move by the state, and has so far kept to the long-established line of the, quote, eternal politics and security of the Syndicate region is a matter for the Intaki Syndicate, end quote. A flurry of diplomatic activity before the state's forces moved into DS-TAC M4Q has some observers speculating that the Federation has declined to dispute the move to avoid an escalation of direct confrontation with the large Caldari expeditionary fleet assembled in Semenuni. So, this is a big one, guys. This is big on a lot of different levels. This is huge on a lot of different levels. So, let's talk about this a little bit from like a lore point of view, okay? What happened here? Well, at the beginning of Uprising, the Galente invaded and took the constellations that contained and was adjacent to Intaki. This also gave them control leading up to the doorstep to Intaki Syndicate area. Okay. In fact, let's look at how close these two systems, how close these two things are. If we open up our map, F10. And we go to, what was it? DS Tech M. Oh, I already have it saved. So, this is the DS Tech M4Q constellation. Now, I've checked. Every single system that it's adjacent to is sovereignty of the Syndicate, right? Including this constellation, right? So the adjacent constellation, here's Caldari space. You can see it's still nullsec. This is what's cool. It's still nullsec, but it's now owned by the Caldari state. This is because the security of the system has to do with control of Concord, not control of the Empire. But this does make it the only sovereignty that is owned by one of the core empires that is not high or low security. So it's the very first time that a empire has encroached into nullsec. And that is profoundly interesting for a lot of different things, not just Amar's forceful invasion, upcoming and impending forceful invasion of Stain. But so you have Poidot here. Poidot is not just the only named system in Syndicate. It also happens to be basically the home system of the Intaki Syndicate, being ran by a lady named Sylphie, who has an interesting story and another piece of that Intaki lore update that I'd like to give you. But she's got connections. She's connected. Her childhood friends. She's childhood friends with the Serpentis family, so she knows both the head matron, Salvatore, I think Serpentis, and V Serpentis, that's the head matron of the Sisters of Eve and the head of the Serpentis, which you may not know are brothers and sisters. So, or brother and sister, I think adopted, but they're not really big fans of each other. And now Sylphie is not a big fan of, the Reverend, Salvatore, the sister, also now doesn't like Sylphie. She refers to her brother as King Serpent, and now has taken to referring to her as Queen Sylphie of the Syndicate or something like that, which to her is kind of a snide response. Either way, my point is that this, hold on, spoilers, or was it? No. There it is. Got it. All right. So this area by the Caldari state, right? The thing about this is, if you go here, hold on. Which one is it? Shit. Sorry. If we go to Intaki, here we go. So Intaki, or the constellation with Intaki, I should say. Man, I got this earlier today, and now I can't find it. Oh, that's because I'm looking the wrong way. Yeah. So you've got this. This is the constellation. This is one of the two constellations that the Gallente seized, I'm pretty sure. And this one definitely is, because this is the one with Intaki. So yeah, this constellation, including Austingale, you go one more jump, right? God damn it. No, it's Harul. You go to Harul, one jump into the Syndicate, and then one further jump to get to UM-Tech Q7F, which is part of the Caldari state. So now this system here, it functions as like the bridging point between the space that was taken by the Caldari and the space that was taken by the Gallente, which I believe is these two. And of course, in the middle here is the path to Poidot. So chances are this is going to become a new hotbed of activity, or this is going to be kind of one of the proxy wars in the upcoming Gallente Caldari we'll call it the third Gallente Caldari war, right? Like control over this area. They could even potentially add this in as new faction warfare area if they wanted to. But I suspect that this is going to be one of those things that, depending on what we do, may control the overall fate of the Syndicate region, as the Gallente want to pull them in, and the Caldari occupy it to protect the Syndicate, basically the state functioning as a rallying point for various rebel groups to the Gallente Federation, right? Like other groups that have split off from the Gallente. Intaki fried your children? Is that close enough to Intaki, to Sino into Intaki? I'd have to look it up. But it is certainly like within jump. Yeah, it's got to be. Hold on. Isn't there a way to do that from here? I think I have to be in a jump capable ship, don't I? Or is it not even a thing? I don't know. There is a way to see your jump range, but I think it only happens if you're in a jump capable ship. And I'd have to be in this system, I think. But either way, yeah. It's kind of interesting though, isn't it? Like, because here's a goes, Intaki, and then furthermore, down here, is this it? No, this isn't even it. Yeah. So this is the Pegalar constellation, which has also been very important recently in the news, or not recently, but like over the last few years. So there's Ugalis, which is, again, you can watch my video on the Ugalis situation to get more information about that. So we've got Ugalis constellation, then we've got the Intaki constellation, and then we've got the Caldari constellation, and they're that close to each other. So this area right here is going to be the place to watch when it comes to the state and the Federation and their conflict with one another. And to me, it seems obvious that they're really jockeying for something else, right? Like these are positions that they're trying to get. So that way, my guess has been that they eventually want to go after well, there's the Surthrud constellation too. So yeah, you've got Pegalar, and then immediately goes into hold on. Where's Surthrud? We were just there. Oh, it's up there. So there's a constellation still between them. But this is all Gallente space. Very interesting indeed. And then this is, yeah, this is just Sovnol. That's just pure blind at that point. Intaki is not a megacorp. What? No, the Intaki is, I mean, it's a people. It's a race. Yeah, it does feel like we're still being kept in the dark about some of the true purposes to all of this, right? It's worth noting that the other side of the coin is happening around here, right? Like, come on. Here's the Turner. Here's Turner. And over here is Syndicate. So it's like literally on opposite sides of Gallente space, honestly. Right? Because this whole area in the middle is Gallente. There is the Amarr down here. And there's the Minmatar up here. Here. Their coloration is really odd. Like, why aren't the Gallente green and the Caldari blue and the... Anyway, whatever. So the Minmatar are here and the Amarr down here. So this is their war zone in between, including Turner. And then the Solitude stuff is over here. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that this area right here in between, isn't this the Trace Cosmos? Don't they say that on here? I thought they said it on here. Let me find it real quick, see if I can figure it out. All of my chats are gone. Hold on. When will Mordu weigh in? Yeah. So Mordu is also caught up in all of this. Since Mordu's Legion was originally basically a bunch of Intaki. I had to be zoomed in, yeah. But I was. There it is. So yeah. Right in this area. Oh, that's right. Hold on. There it is. That's what it was. I'm wrong. So this area up here, see this blank spot between Syndicate and Solitude? There's actually a phenomena there known as the Court of the Elements. And down here, below Solitude, is the Trace Cosmos. Interestingly enough, the closest thing is Sovereignty of the Amarr, and that gate kind of crosses through the Trace Cosmos. There is a Gallente observation post, I think it is. Is it in here? I don't actually know where the Trace Cosmos is visible off the top of my head. Let me go look real quick. G-E-R-E. So yeah, from this system, you can see the Trace Cosmos clearly. And it looks like this. In fact, hold on. This is a video recording I made. Now, these are all sped up. So that's the Eve Gate. So this is the Court of the Elements. And this is the Trace Cosmos. This is why I had to find the video of it, because an image just doesn't do it justice. I think I get another picture of the Trace Cosmos, don't I? Yeah. It's really cool. It's got little wormholes propping up in all over the place. But either way, the Court of the Elements and the Trace Cosmos are really sculpted the formation of Syndicate and the Serpentis area. What is it? Shoot. Solitude and Syndicate. That's right. So, yeah. And it's worth noting that these were all part of the landmarks that were updated a couple of years ago. In fact, what did the YouTube video say? 1 year ago, April 7th, 2021. And just so you guys can see it, because it looks like some people might not have seen these before. This is also the Pool of Radiance, which is inside of Sancha territory. This is actually visible from another system. And then this is the Eve Gate again. Anywho. Just a little additional fun fact. So yeah, it's going to be worth noting, or it's going to be worth watching. But my question is, you were living in the Syndicate pocket that the Chord's landmark was in at the time? That's cool. The question that I have is, how much of all of this has been because of us? How much of it has been sculpted by us? How much of it has been playing out? Because we're dealing with forces that are bigger than us, right? The empires are bigger than any given capsuleer or even capsuleer groups. They can pull off stuff that we can't. And they also are above Concord rather than under Concord. So these are all really important. But how much are we influencing this story? Because it really starts to be like, well, did they invade Intaki as hard as they did because of the fact that we didn't get the Surthud constellation? Is the Magnon Stargate now going to point to Intaki? Was it always the purpose? How does this relate to Solitude? And most importantly, here's the thing. Changing a faction warfare systems to non-faction warfare systems was pretty damn radical. But the Caldari state taking nullsec systems changes the game completely, right? This is now a thing that can happen. This brings us one step closer to that idea of bringing the front lines and faction warfare kind of systems to the pirate factions as well. This is one step closer. This is a peaceful negotiation, but then when the Amar invade Stain, we're going to see a militarized version of that, right? Which, by the way, they've been moving capitals in position to be able to do that. So, I don't know anymore, man. Like, I couldn't tell you what would have happened, how much of this would have happened, and how much of it would have happened differently if we had managed to seize control of Alphanoon and hold it and take it for the Gallente, right? Chances are it would have been different, and it seems pretty significantly different if you think about it, because each piece is playing out as a consequence to the previous one. So some of this could have been prepared. Like I said, Celis Agard taking Intaki, or Celis Agard, doing that kind of thing to Intaki, supporting Intaki, has been like a thing for her forever. But if they're using the Surthrud constellation to move to Solitude, or to move to the Syndicate, the state is, because they're staging their support in Sam, which is gated to Alphanoon. So if that is their route in, then what would have happened if we had stopped them from making the gate, right? How much of this would have been different? And on the going back to the Amarr Minmatar side, if the Amarr were trying to link the three systems together, what would have happened if the Minmatar had not taken those two systems? Would they have been successful? Maybe the Amarr would have completed their research, and then they would have had their own mini Pochfin between the three systems. Or maybe even four, if you include the other one, the Arcat capture transmuter. We don't know. We don't know. And we may never know what the actual impact of it is. But I think that we are beyond the point of saying that we aren't part of the story, right? It's kind of weird because, like I said, the empires are making moves that are bigger than us, right? So it's easy to say like, oh, well, the Gallente just took those systems, and like see that it's not being done by players as a thing. But if you think about it, like these are all amplifications and ramifications about what we're doing. So the other thing about this is, like I said, if the Caldari, we now have nullsec systems that are still nullsec, but are owned by an empire. What any rule that we used to have about the way these kinds of things are supposed to play out is thrown out the window, right? CCP's been working to make things less static for a long time, but this is a very interesting version of that. This isn't just like making it so that anomalies move around or making dynamic bounty systems or anything like that. This is like the map itself is going to be adjusted over and over and over again based on what people do. And that is really, really interesting. And it also, to me, reminds me of real life, right? Because like, we never know, we have to make some hard decisions. Like things have to happen. And we may never know what the other outcome would have been, right? So I don't know, man. It's pretty ballsy, in my opinion, to move on to this kind of world. But I think it's really, really cool. And I think as this unfolds over time, it's going to be even more interesting because the line between player action and players and the lore has always been very fuzzy. But this makes it so that, the story of the players and the story of the empires in this regard are very much intertwined. So again, we're going to have to see how this sovereignty plays out, because chances are the Federation are not going to just let it go. And in addition to that, and it's also a threat on their border, another threat on their border, I should say. Where was I? Oh, so the Caldari, when the Gallente took that area, that was a violation of the Emergency Militia War Powers Act. So that was against the rules, according to faction warfare. That was the Gallente violating the Concord agreements. That's a big problem, right? And the Gallente, or the the Caldari, were very, very careful to ensure that their response was very, minimal. They they fortified the system of Othanoon and took down, or like captured, the Gallente Stargate, which they might be transforming into a gate to Syndicate. But either way, like, they made a big point to not take the system as Caldari, and instead leave it up to keep the militia iHub intact, because they wanted the Gallente to be in the wrong firmly. But this move is a power move, taking of systems, expanding of resources, expanding of operations, but it doesn't violate the rules, right? Like, they did it by the book. They made an agreement with the people. They registered it with Concord. The Caldari are being very, very careful to make sure that their moves are on the up and up, at least on the surface. Whereas the Gallente feel like they're a little bit more... Well, the Gallente really think that they're slick. That's one of the things about them. So I assume that they thought that the whoopsie woo, or the misdirection, and that led to them being able to take Intaki. I'm sure that they felt that they're pretty clever about that. But again, though, in this case, their reaction was very muted. They didn't really give a solid response, which tells me either they are likewise trying to navigate this incredibly sticky situation and not rile up anything and remove public opinion even more, because they're already having serious protests. And protesting in the Federation is much more disruptive than protesting in the state. But it could also mean that they are going to react, and we're going to have to see what the actual reaction is, right? As in, like, a military strike. So things are playing out pretty quick. I don't have a timeline for anything at the moment. I'm trying to think of, like, when things would play out. But really, it's just play it by ear. I don't know if the next shoe drops tomorrow or the next shoe drops a week from now. The next thing that I know of in the files is likely related to the winter event, which is still a few weeks away. So there's plenty of stuff to develop ahead of time. And of course, now that Uprising is out, it's going to be time for CCP to start talking about the next stuff. Although, before we even get into that, I'm going to caution that CCP's first quarter is usually pretty quiet, especially January, because everybody was on vacation for December. So it's probably not going to be like that much unless they already had something relatively prepared. You see it as being shocked speechless? I don't know, man. Let me go read it again.
For every city